Who is?
Johnny, my son, and Julie, my daughter-in-law.
I head off to Utah?
We're headed to Utah for a ski trip.
Oh, nice.
Ready when you are.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call the study session meeting of March 27th, 2024 to order. City Clerk, may we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Lamb. Councilmember Gutierrez.
Here.
Councilmember Gregory. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Ross. Mayor Carnevale.
Here. Are there any changes to the agenda?
I have no changes, Mayor.
Thank you. City Clerk, will you please read the statement of participation? Are there any members that wish to provide public comment at this time?
So, public comment is the opportunity for members of the public to comment on items that are within the City Council's jurisdiction but not on the agenda. Because of restrictions contained in California law, the City Council may not discuss or act on any item not on the agenda, but may briefly respond to statements made or ask a question for clarification. The mayor may also request a brief response from staff to questions raised or during public comment or request that a matter be agendized for a future meeting. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes. If you are a member of the public and you wish to address the City Council, please complete a request to speak form available at the entrance and submit it to the City Clerk. You will be called upon at the appropriate time. If you have materials or other items to present to the members of the City Council, please do not approach them. All materials shall be presented to the City Clerk for distribution. I do not have any request to speak forms, but if you're a member of the public and you wish to provide public comment at this time, please raise your hand.
All right, thank you. Mr. City Manager, will you please explain the interview process to the Finance Advisory Committee interviews?
Sure, I'll go up there in just a minute and we'll just put them in order. And there's really probably no benefit to going first, second, or third in the interviews, but we just like to demonstrate that we're treating everybody fairly and letting the computer pick the numbers for us. After that, whoever comes up first will call up to the podium. The council members have some prepared questions ahead of time. I think they'll go around and each person will ask a question. They'll just ask for your responses to that. And then at the end, we'll move on to the next candidate. We have 3 candidates. We do have 4 openings on the Finance Advisory Committee. In your regular agenda, there is an item to allow you to make the appointments should you decide that you want to do that after the interview process. So I'll go up and do the ordering, and then we'll
Thank you.
go. And so just for ease of this, we put them in alphabetical order by last name. So Hargraves is 1, Lee is 2, Saldivar is 3. So we'll put, it's all ready to go up there. I'll get a sequence. And number 2 is first, which would be Lee. And then second is Hargreaves, and third would be Rick.
Good afternoon. Danny Lee, Cathedral City.
Hello, Danny. Thank you for your interest in the Finance Committee. Please tell the council a little about yourself and why you are interested in serving the committee.
Okay, I moved to the city 7 years ago, and since then I've been involved in a number of different roles, both with the city and locally with resident committees. And prior to retiring in 2010, I spent some 30-odd years in the IT industry. I served at lots of levels, from project management and business manager to the IT director for a company in Silicon Valley. So had a lot of business background before then, and since coming to the city and working with different committees, I've learned interesting things like fund accounting, which was not something I knew anything about when I first started here. So I think that experience has helped me understand more about finances. And of course, recently I worked on the Ad Hoc Residence Committee, which produced a proposal for the sales tax increase. So.
Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. How are you today?
Good.
Great. So the mission and purpose of Cathedral City Finance Advisory Committee is to explore ways to develop revenue enhancement and diversification strategies and to advise and make recommendations on such matters to the City Council. What background do you have that makes you in tune with that?
I think I may have covered that, some of that already.
A little bit. I didn't have time to retype a question.
But, it's an interesting point. My view is that the advisory function from non-elected members of the public is extremely useful, I hope, useful to the city's council. I think that we can step back away from essentially the local politics of the thing and look at what residents are looking for, so we can bring that advice to the city council. Now, in the past, of course, I've been involved in things like the STVR campaign, Measure K, the consideration of how we can provide recreation for the city. So in those areas, I think I've gathered some expertise about how the city can work with outside agencies, how the city can leverage its own finances in order to serve those needs. And I hope through that experience, I can bring my own view of what the city and residents are looking for. As we saw, for example, in the Parks Commission, we saw input from residents there. Planning Commission also actually gives a lot of input about what residents think about different projects. So I'm hoping that all that comes together and is useful in this role.
Thank you very much.
Councilman Gutierrez.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Now, one of the roles of the Finance Advisory Committee is to provide oversight on the use of the funds raised through tax measures. Can you tell us the importance of such Citizens Oversight Committee?
Yes, I think this was actually a key part of the discussion that we had when we were looking at the recommendation for a sales tax increase. There were pretty much everybody, I think, on that committee was concerned at one point or another that the revenue, the $5 million that we would raise from a 5-cent tax increase, would be correctly used for the strategy that we were putting together, which was for road repairs, for safety, and for recreation. And I think that question came up repeatedly, actually. Well, how do we ensure that that really happens? Because this money would be going into the general fund, because it's a general purpose sales tax increase. And I think it's important, actually, that this committee, the Finance Advisory Committee, does take that under advisement and does ensure that that happens by not just giving advice, but also monitoring what's happening with those expenditures. And I think we would do that with, obviously, the advice of Kevin and Charlie while he's still here. So.
Well, thank you.
Councilman Gregory.
Thank you, Danny, for being here today, for your interest and all of the ways you have served the city already and continue to serve. So this is probably a hard question here because it's a test question, okay? So it's just, and so the others will get a little advantage because hearing you have the test question, but we want to talk a little bit about revenue, okay? So I was wondering what your understanding is of what revenues the city does get and how those if there's restrictions on how those revenues can be used or not. So this.
Well, it takes me right back to my favorite fund accounting.
There you go.
And I don't pretend to be an expert. Frequently ask Kevin, why can't we do this? And he says, well, because it's in the wrong fund. And I go, okay, then that's all right. So yeah, I understand that we have a tax base. Sales tax and obviously the TUT, other tax income. We also have the fees we collect through licensing, business licensing, through the police. And then surprisingly to a lot of residents, but I try and let people know this when I can, a small amount of revenue from property taxes. There's a widespread belief in the city that we are like Palm Springs that gets 60 cents per dollar of property tax as income when we only get 16 cents per dollar. And that is a massive difference for our city, and it all relates to when, well, you know this, relates to when we were incorporated. So I think I have a fair understanding of how revenue works, but I'm not shy in asking questions when I don't understand the process. And we have wonderful resources in the city that are always available to answer questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Lamb.
All right. Nice to see you here, and thank you for your interest. This is wonderful. One of the city's challenges is that demand for services from the community often exceeds our ability to pay for such services. What suggestions to you have you to us to meet that challenge?
Well, I think the question should say always exceeds. There's always more that the residents want from the city than the city can provide. And the city, part of that actually is education, because something that people won't understand quite often is why we have lots and lots of money and we're not spending it. The fact that we are reliant on a 6-month income to pay the other 6 months escapes a lot of people. So those kinds of things. In terms of increasing revenue, I think we have to look at a number of different things. There may not be a lot of big things that we can do, but one of the biggest is to apply for each and every grant that we qualify for. And I was extremely pleased to say that we now have a full-time grant person. I think we should have done it years ago. And it's something that I raised probably 6 or 7 years ago, that why didn't we have a grant writer? And if my argument was always, if a grant writer can't actually bring in more revenue than we pay them, then they're not a very good grant writer. You know, it should be a no cost for us in that respect. So grants is a major one, but I think there are other ways that we can enter into agreements with companies for sponsorships, for support, as we've seen with some of Ryan's activities. We get what was it, 50,000 in air display for the LGBT days. So we can bring in those kinds of benefits too. And one of the things that I talked about when I was on the Parks Commission, I'd really like to see us push more to get some of the things other cities do. For example, we used to have an arrangement with the now gone ice rink where local people would get a discount on Wednesdays. It's not a huge thing, but it's a way that we can stretch out our dollars by doing that. So if we could build those relationships with businesses, we could extend better benefits. It's not revenue, but it's better benefits to the residents of the community. So I would like to see that happen. And then there's also licensing, and I know that we put this off when the amphitheater was built, and there were good reasons for doing that, but I'm hoping that, for example, will be leveraged at some point by licensing naming rights to the amphitheater with a company. So I think there are a number of different ways that we could explore to expand what we can do, even if we're not getting more revenue.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Danny, for your answers. I was really impressed especially on your answers on 3 and 4. Is there anything else you'd like to say to finish up? Anything you can think of that you haven't already said?
No, I'm not usually shy in coming forward. But I think that's pretty much covered all the aspects of this particular committee.
All right. Thank you, Danny,
All right.
very much. And I believe we have Terry Hargrave. Hi, Terry.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Councilman.
How's Bob?
He's great.
Is he?
He's working 1% of the time. I
You
was
keep him
just
working,
telling
huh?
Eric.
Good.
Mostly working from the hammock.
Good. Thank you for your interest in the Finance Committee. Please tell the council a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in serving the committee.
I'm happy to do so, but first let me tell you, Danny has set a high bar. And he's very articulate, and my answers will be a lot shorter and not as informed as Danny's. I'm interested in serving on the committee because I've been a resident for over 30 years, and now that I'm retired and the kids, for the most part, don't need my assistance every day at least, I have the time that I would like to, that I'm able to spend to help the city. I don't have a background in finance per se, but I think you know that I'm an attorney, and my field was, my practice was in estate planning. So obviously that involved numbers and finances. But I think what I'm really good at, and this will go to your, answer your question that I know is coming, Councilmember Ross, is I'm very good at details. And I'm good at reading, and I'm understanding and being able to learn about things, but especially the attention to details. So I've been involved in just a few activities with the city, as you are well aware, with the SDVR campaign, and then more recently with the committee that the resident committee that discussed the how to improve recreation services, and also the ambulance, and also our streets. So I was involved in that, and I attended all the meetings, as Charlie can tell you, and so I'm dependable, and that's why I want to
Great.
be on the committee.
Thank you.
You're
Mayor Pro
welcome.
Tem.
That was my question.
That was your question?
I did.
Okay, well, all right. And we appreciate saving time here, so that's a plus. Councilmember Gutierrez.
Thank you. Hi, Terry.
Hi.
Now, one of the rules of the Finance Committee, same questions as I asked earlier. One of the rules of the Finance Advisory Committee is to provide oversight on the use of funds raised through city tax measures. Can you tell us the importance to have such citizens oversight committee?
I think one reason, major reason, is so that the residents in the city can see that there is someone who is a non-elected member overseeing what's being done, and maybe have more input that we hear on social media, or that we hear when we speak with other residents and our friends and neighbors and so forth. And so I think for that reason, it's another level of scrutiny, if you will, also, and another level of input and review. And I think that's important for transparency and also just to generate new ideas.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gregory.
Are you ready for the test now? It's the same question, so you'll be able to draw on what was said before, but we want to talk a little bit about revenue. And maybe if you could talk about your understanding of what revenues are available to the city, any specific uses or restrictions on different types of revenues.
I don't have as much detailed knowledge as Danny does, but I'm a quick learner. But I do know that I agree with his comment about property taxes, and I think a lot of people have that misunderstanding that the city gets a lot of money from property taxes that we learned when we were on the recent committee. That is just not the case. And then the taxes, sales tax, and also the TOT. And then some grant writing, some grants, but not as much as we could have.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Lamb.
One of the city's challenges is that demand for services from the community often exceeds our ability to pay for such services. What suggestions do you have for us to meet that challenge? Thank you.
I think when I heard your question when I was back there, I was thinking communication is what came to mind. And then Danny used the word education. The two things are the same. And I think the city is doing a much better job in communicating to the residents the financial situation of the city, and then also its efforts to try to meet the desires of what the residents want, and the fact that there just isn't enough money to go around for everything. And so I think it does come down to working with the residents and also communication. Okay.
Thank you. Anything else you'd like to add, Terry?
No, it would be an honor, really, to serve. I haven't been that involved in things with the city other than living 24/7 with the STVR campaign. But I really did enjoy working on the, being involved in the latest committee that we had with Charlie, and I enjoyed that. So any way that I can give back, I'd like to do that. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rick?
Hello, Council. Rick Saldivar, resident of Cathedral City.
Hi, Rick. Thank you for your interest in the Finance Advisory Committee. Please tell the council a little bit about yourself, like we don't already know a little bit about yourself, but we do. You could say what you like.
Well, I'm really excited about this. I'm really excited. I was invited to join the ad hoc committee for this new tax proposal, and it really opened my eyes to a lot of things. Now, over the last 16 years, I was the outreach pastor, executive outreach pastor for Destiny Church, and in June of 2023, I resigned to found my own organization, Chance Initiative, that focuses on formerly incarcerated individuals and youth who are at risk. Right now, I'm the new kid on the block in the nonprofit sector, but I'm not the new kid on the neighborhood. So I've been fresh, I've been in organization for about 8 months, and in those 8 to 7 months that we've been in existence, I have been able to secure funding because of the financial know-how of how to look for money for funding. Having a nonprofit, working for a church on a church budget, if anybody knows about it, it's all about penny pinching, finding out where fundings come, especially when you're innovating programs. So that's a little bit about myself, but I'm really excited about having this opportunity to serve on this financial committee.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. The mission and purpose of the Cathedral City Finance Advisory Committee is to explore ways to develop revenue, enhance and diversification strategies, and to advise and make recommendations on such matters to the City Council. It finishes by saying, how would your previous experience help you with this? And I believe you just said that. So can we just tweak it just within that same realm there? How would your previous experience work specifically with developing revenue enhancement and diversification strategies?
I'm a big believer in grant funding. I'm a big believer. It has worked for me over the last 16, 17 years. There's money out there. You have to know how to navigate it, how to get it. For my previous organization, I believe I brought in a little bit over $2 million in a 5-year span for innovating programs to help individuals. On my own, in the last short 6 months, from private funding and in government funding in different organizations, I think I brought in $30,000. This is new. I'm a year in, and that's what I believe in. The city of Palm Springs, in a few months ago, there was an opiate crisis, and there was this huge settlement in the billions of dollars. Well, their staff found out about a settlement for city municipalities, and they were awarded $215,000 the first years, and for the next 18 years, they're going to get $100,000 every single year. That's what I call revenue from to help the community. I'm huge on that, and I find there's grant funding opportunities everywhere. How you navigate them, how you pull it, who do you talk to, how you write it, the verbiage, it's key to getting this fund. And that is something that I want to add to the city too. And I'm glad that you guys have a grant writer, because I kind of want to pick their brain and see what, how we could, do something so we could get some, good funding. So grant funding for me has always been a big hit, and I consider it a great asset to the city.
Councilman Gutierrez.
Good afternoon, Rick. Same question as I did the other two. One of the roles of the Finance Advisory Committee is to provide oversight on the use of funds raised through city tax measures. Why do you think it is important to have such citizens' oversight?
It's super important, and I'm going to echo Danny. I think when we came up with some of the proposals, everybody jumped up at once and says, what happens to the money if, the next council, whoever's on seat, it just disappears or goes somewhere else? So that's what one of the things I ask. I mean, what we need an oversight for this. We need people who are connected to the residents, who see the needs every day. And I think at one point I said, so what happens if that doesn't work? And I think Charlie says, well, then you scream bloody murder. And I think having an oversight committee is very important, because then we're allowed to scream bloody murder as residents, to hold accountable for what we told our people to, hey, this is a tax increase that's going to go for, youth services, is going to go to streets or the firemen, and then we have to have accountability. So we need an oversight that really sees this.
Councilmember Gregory.
Well, hi, Rick. Thank you so much for being here and your interest in this committee, and for all the work you've done in our community, making it better. So, as before, this is the test question, and just a little bit about your understanding about revenue. And you've already heard a couple of answers here, and I think you have an understanding of even of city revenue from some of your of the past discussion. So if you can just share a little bit about your understanding of what different types of revenue that the city does get, any restrictions or nuances on that revenue that you'd want to share.
Yeah, I'm not a scholar, but I am going to tell you that last night at 2 o'clock in the morning, I sent out my last essay for my degree. It's a 5-year journey. I turned it in. Today I'm assignment free. And during that time, I was able to do a lot of research and a lot of essay writings, and I used Cathedral City as, as a projects for some of my essay writings, and, tax revenues. How else could we do that? So I do have a slight understanding. I'm not a scholar, and I think I kind of showed that face to Charlie and a couple of the presenters when I was, frequently asked, explain it to me like I'm a 3-year-old. Where is this money coming from and where is it going? And I think some of the room got it, but I was the last one to get it. But that's what I do. I kind of ask, I kind of, see where money's coming from. So my understanding is pretty well informed as far as, the TOTs, cannabis tax, Riverside County, how much we get off of them, and the illustrations they used, they were pretty self-explanatory. So that's what made me more inquisitive to say, I want to be part of this committee, because I want to learn more from you guys and, the staff on how we could use all this, money and how we get this revenue.
Councilmember Lamb.
Hi there, Rick. Good to see you, and thank you for your willingness. One of the city's challenges is that demand for services from the community often exceeds our ability to pay for such services. What suggestions do you have for us to meet that challenge?
Well, again, like I said, when Palm Springs received that grant money, I said, I wonder if we ever consider that. So, all that stuff. And that is how I would see offsetting some of the costs. I would see what other organizations. Now, I think at one point or another, I had heard that Cathedral City had a nonprofit organization, right? Mm-hmm. Is that correct? You guys have a section that's nonprofit?
We had a downtown foundation. That may be what you're referring to.
Okay, something like that. So I thought, why doesn't Cathedral City have a foundation or a nonprofit where we could go get more money, to offset some of these programs that, services? Maybe government will not give money for a certain type of funding for something that is city dealings, but they might give it to a nonprofit attached to the city that might go to, I don't know, housing, building fences, services like, property enhancements. I'm not sure, but that would be one of my things.
Rick, thank you. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I mean, I'm here to serve you guys.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll take public comments from the members of the public who wish to comment on this item only.
I don't have any request to speak forms for this item, but if you're a member of the public and you wish to provide public comment, please raise your hand. And I see no hands
Okay,
raised.
thank you very much. The appointments will be made during the regular meeting under item 6A, and I believe that's one of the first items, isn't that, Charlie?
I think it is the first one after.
Yeah. Okay, and so you're welcome to come back or watch us on TV with the thousands of other viewers. All right, thank you. Item B, Community Development Block Grant, 24-25 Annual Action Plan. City Manager, do we have a staff report?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Each year prior to the actual public hearing on CDBG, we do an introductory presentation to the council that lays the groundwork for where we believe we're headed on our CDBG allocation. Then it comes back to you for a required public hearing at a future meeting. We're following that same outline this year. David Rozzo, who I think you met once before when he was up here, is in our engineering department and is working on our CDBG annual action plan, and he's going to give you the introduction to where we're going with the AAP this year. David?
Thank you for the introduction, City Manager, Honorable Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. This afternoon, I will be discussing the Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan. Throughout this presentation, Community Development Block Grant is also known as CDBG, so I apologize in advance if I use a lot of acronyms. Outlined with our 5-year consolidated plan, each year we are asked to provide an annual action plan that aligns with those objectives, that fits within the realms of our CDBG funds. Typically, our allocation is broken down into 3 parts. We have a percentage staying under 20% for program administration, a smaller percentage for public services, and the remaining amount for public improvements or infrastructure, which does not have a cap. As of today, we have not received our 24-25 allocation amount. There is no set timeline as to when that will be, but we will be sure to receive one. So hopefully by our next meeting, I will have a number for you. We are anticipating, however, it to be similar to the 23-24, which is $570,000. The proposed fiscal year 24-25 annual action plan comprises of program administration and public infrastructure. As part of our biannual budget, the public services component is being proposed to be funded through the general fund, which is similar to the 23-24 year. Our proposed public improvements for the 24-25 fiscal year, as outlined in our CIP projects, is the Whitewater Neighborhood Reconstruction Project and the Sidewalk Repair Assistance Program. As outlined in your staff report, and this picture will suggest, these are the proposed streets as part of the Whitewater Neighborhood Reconstruction. And again, along with your staff report, here is a breakdown of the proposed annual action plan for the CDBG program. As of today, we are introducing the annual action plan. On March 30th, the city staff will be posting a 30-day notice for public comments on our annual action plan as per our requirements for HUD. April 28th, we will end that posting for the 30-day notice for public comment, and on May 8th, I will be here presenting to you for the approval of our annual action plan. At this time, there's no fiscal impact to develop the annual action plan, but please note there will be a fiscal impact when City Council approves a contract for the Whitewater Neighborhood Reconstruction Project. And if any remaining funds from the fiscal year 23-24 annual action plan, these funds will be programmed to our current year. This aligns with our 5-year strategic plan, Goal B, community investment. Staff is requesting at this time review and support the proceedings for the proposed fiscal year 24-25 annual action plan. That is the end of my project.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we have Council.
Turned it off. Thank you for the presentation and for taking on this job. Can you go back in your charts on your PowerPoint to the chart where you have the funding laid out? It's got a table on it.
Right here.
All right, this is new to me because this is what it looks like and what went to the council and what went out to the public. It only had the public improvement section. So when I looked at it, I thought we were spending the entire amount on public improvements now, which kind of raised some questions. As you said, the council before has discussed and moved money in the general fund to cover the public services. But I thought, wow, look how great the city's being. We're not taking an administrative allowance, and we're not. And my question had to do with what we're going to do about fair housing. But I see that's not the case. So if you'd wait just a minute, I'm going to write what is here.
And again, my apologies. I'm not sure how that would have happened, but I will be sure to correct that. Yes, so this is a breakdown of, again, our anticipated allocation of $570,000. Per our CDBG requirements, there is a percentage that cannot exceed administrative funding as well as, in this case, public improvements. And so we have a 20% for planning and administration, which also comprises of the fair housing mitigation. And then the remaining amount will be towards our public improvements.
And so that fair housing mitigation, is that likely to be a payment to, I think it was like the Inland Empire Fair Housing?
So in the past, yes, we have had inland fair housing, and that is definitely a topic moving forward. Per CDBG, we are tasked with going out to bid each year for a competitive, and they are certainly in the conversation. And so we will be tasked with providing a similar service, homeowner renter mitigation, which is what inland fair housing has done for us in the past. And so
I don't understand the answer. So it is going to be Inland Empire, it may be Inland Empire, or it may be,
they are currently with us.
Are you saying it's going to be in-house?
No, inland fair housing is who we have for the 23-24 fiscal year.
Right.
Per our CDBG, we still have to go out for proposals to keep it competitive. So there is a good chance, but again, we have to go out for those services.
And so will we know who that provider is going to be before we approve this AAP, or will that be sometime later? And will that be something that comes back before the council to approve?
For the annual action plan?
For that, who gets the fair housing mitigation money?
So the fair housing will be conducted as part of the administrative, which will not necessarily be part of the annual action plan. That's just a breakdown of how it will be funded. So more than likely.
All right, so I'm lost because I've been here, this is my 6th year, and I don't remember ever somebody coming in front of us with a bid for who is going to handle the fair housing mitigation before. So that's what I'm asking. Is that new? Is that something that's now going to come to us?
David has been a good job of working with our HUD rep in fixing any gaps we've had, and our HUD rep said that he suggested that we make that at least competitive, and we should do that every year.
That sounds great to me. I think we love competitive and making sure that we're getting good return for the money.
Correct.
But so then my question though is, what's that process going to look like? It's going to go out for bid and then come back to us with a review?
We're going to solicit RFPs with that number in mind to see who can do it. So potentially everyone's going to bid on that price, and then we'll review the proposals for providing the best service to the city.
Yeah, because hopefully they'll differentiate on then, if they have this much money, what are you going to do for us?
Correct.
Type of a thing, instead of a type of a bid where we look for, who can do it for the, we define what needs to be done and see who's going to do it the cheapest. It'll be kind of, we have this much money, if we award it to you, what can you do with that? And then,
correct.
But it will come back to be reevaluated or approved by the council.
We can bring that back to you for approval.
Okay. Well,
and
that would make
knowing
sense.
the time taken in this 30 days, we probably could be able to bring that back at the same meeting.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Didn't mean to throw you off, but this was new. So,
All that's required for at least the annual action plan is that we have someone doing that. So that's not necessarily integral to us approving the annual
I see.
action plan.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
You're very welcome. Mayor Pro Tem?
Oh, I'm sorry, my question was answered. I should have taken mine off.
Okay.
My question was answered when you answered Councilmember Gregory.
Councilmember Lamb.
Great, and thank you so much, David. I just, it mentioned in here that the sidewalk repair assistance program was from 10 to now 5,000. Does the 5,000, and this is just because I have forgotten when it was originally presented to us.
Correct.
Does that just correlate to one request? 5,000 per one request? Is that?
No, it's from 5,000 is based off the repair for the sidewalks. So
Right,
it varies,
but
yeah.
I was going to say, my question is, it was 10,000.
Yes, it covers up to 5, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
And we're reducing based off demand.
Right, thank you.
All right, I think that, any public comments?
I do not have any request to speak forms, but if you're a member of the public and you wish to provide public comments on this item, please raise your hand.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
I see no hands raised, Mayor.
Thank you. This is a presentation only for discussion and direction. Only, there is no formal action required. Grants management overview. Mr. City Manager, do we have a staff report?
Thank you. As you heard from some of your interviewees for the Finance Advisory Committee, we have a grants analyst and a grants program that we are establishing now in the city. It is new this year, and we're really pleased to be able to be making progress in that. So Kevin Biersack is here to give you an update on where we are and where we're going in the grants world.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, City staff. Welcome guests. We also have Amanda Geisendorfer. That is a mouthful. She is our grants analyst, and Rick Vogt, who is also an analyst. And they have been an effective Mutt and Jeff routine for the last 3.5 months with respect to standing up what we're doing from a grant standpoint. So that's what we're here for this afternoon, is to talk about just that, solicit your feedback, and march forward. And hopefully we'll smile and salute smartly too at the same time. So, with respect to grants, this basically, you saw this a long time ago, back in the March-April timeframe. We had identified these 8 items that we would want to pursue. They're in a different order now. We kind of have them in a logical order, but these were the 8 items that we identified on what we thought we would do if you approved the grants analyst position in the biennial budget that you approved last May. So this has a little bit more words and it has a little bit more flavor to it. Identifying, determining, preparing and developing and writing and submitting those proposals. Securing and maintaining funding. Managing and monitoring especially the complex grants, because we don't want our internal customers that we serve, we don't want them to sink, we want them to swim. I'm determining principles and practices for grant funding as we get to know some of the agencies even better. And then internally within the ERP, establishing the principles and the practices of grant administration. And there's 2 components. If you remember in the Tyler ERP and Tyler Munis, we have 11 financial modules. And within those 11 financial modules, we have a grant master and we have a grant manager. And so effectively, we're using those tools so that we can keep track of the grants. And we'll talk a little bit about that more in a moment. As usual, feel free to interrupt. If not, save questions for the end.
Well, I'll interrupt.
You go for
I
it.
never hesitate to interrupt. Can you go back?
No, of course
Yes,
I
yes,
can
you
go
can.
back.
So you have this list of all the things that you're looking for, your primary functions. And one of the things that I don't understand how it fits in is we once talked about a grant for, and I'm just going to make something up, for a significant art piece on the one side of the Ramon Bridge, something like that. So if somebody went out for a grant on that, an art piece, would that money go into the arts fund? Would it go into a general fund? Or do we have a separate grants fund?
Depending upon the flavor of the grant, it would probably go into a special revenue fund. And come early May, the intention is to come back to you all in this example, because we're going to be talking about development impact fees, if you remember that. And we, Mallory and London, our two senior accountants, they've been doing a mapping, and we're taking what all the old funds were and moving them over to new funds, one of which is the Art and Public Places Fund. So tied to your analogy, Mayor Pro Tem, tied to that, depending upon what the grant would require, it would be in a special revenue fund like that. And most grants are special revenue funds. Most grants are not part of the general fund. We have an anomaly this year. It's this wonderful little animal called Tropical Storm Hillary. We are incurring costs this year, and those costs have to be incurred out of the general fund initially. And this isn't something that we're going to be addressing with our auditors tied to this year's audit, because we have all these costs. Are we going to need to move those costs over to another fund to track them separately? Because the intention is we're going to get reimbursement. But guess what? Number one, we're not going to get 100%. We know that the most we're going to get under the FEMA and Cal OES formula is 93.75%. We will have a minimum match of 6.25%. So that match will need to come from a fund, probably the general fund. But that 93.75 will probably need to go into its own fund or a subset of an existing fund so that we can track it. Right now, today, we have all those costs in the general fund. And as we get into our interim audit in the May timeframe, that's a key question we're going to be asking our auditors with respect to how are we going to handle this ugly animal.
Thank you. I think I get it.
But it
If
would
not,
be
I don't get
it would be a special revenue.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So what we have here in these next two slides is basically then the subsequent slides. So there are 4 overall components that Amanda and Rick have identified, and those are in these slides, and you'll see them in the left side on boxes and in order, and then on the right side what the components of each one of those are. So I'm just going to breeze through these 2 slides because then we're going to talk about each one of these in a little bit more detail. So it's identifying funding opportunities on the left with the components on the right. The grant application submission process on the left with the components on the right. On the next slide, grant administration on the left.
I didn't know you were switching so fast. Can you go back?
That's because I'm just Speedy Gonzalez today.
So when you say, when there's a question, I need to find it now. No, you'd gone 1, isn't it one more over?
So
Maybe it's to determine
the resources needed for the grant?
I'm sorry?
Determine the resources needed for the grant? Is that where your eyes
No,
are?
determine whether or not we wanted to go forward. Does the grant need council approval, matching funds? I'm sorry, I'll catch it.
And Mayor Pro Tem, we're going to take each one of these and go into more detail in subsequent slides. Grant administration is the 3rd piece of the overview with the elements on the right-hand side, and then grant closure. And that's where we want to make sure we get it right in the financial system in the ERP with the elements on the right over there. So let's look at each one of those 4 boxes in these subsequent slides. First off, this is the grant team and who the people are. Keep in mind just the same thing. Financial services, and especially in the finance division, as well as the facilities division, we service our internal customers. So the grants analysts, these are the initial items that we've identified that are Amanda's primary responsibility. But in supporting department members, those department members, they know their functionality, they know what they do, whether it's shooting bullets or shooting hoses or whatever it is that they do, they best know their functionality. So they'll develop their project plans, they'll obviously provide the technical execution. And sometimes, based on specialties, we do have engineering and public works. They have different people that have helped because they have the domain expertise. We may employ an external grant writer to work maybe alone or to work with Amanda to feed Amanda different types of things, because she will be kind of like the orchestrator. She will be the architect of the grant application in working with people. So let's talk about identifying funding opportunities. So these next couple slides tie back to fitting in those elements that were on the right-hand side in those 2 overview slides of what the functions are. So the grants analyst identifies funding organizations. How? Through subscribing and getting email notifications, through reviewing potential RFPs out there, attending different workshops, for example, signing up for a webinar. Amanda will be doing another webinar next week that our purchasing agent came across and has forwarded to her. Looking at outside sources suggesting RFPs, identifying high-level review of grant requirements, determining based on what's out there with respect to those grants, is it something we should go for, what we should not go for. And in doing that, Amanda is not doing this in a bubble. She is actually going out to the organizations based on who and what and where, and identifying, I've come across this opportunity, is this something that your organization would be interested in? And she identifies the scope and what all the different elements are, and also identifies the opportunity for who can play ball and who can do what. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so there's, many, many grants out there. Little grants, huge grants, and bazillion in the middle. How in advance do you identify what it is you're looking for? So I understand she can go out and find things, but do we also have a hierarchy of, man, we need this first? We really, if you ever in the next 6 months, we should go on that one because we need that, as opposed to others. Do you have some kind of a hierarchy of grant searching?
We're actually, so we've had varying levels of success in what we've done in this short 3 months with different departments. Two good examples have been, we've done quite a bit with the fire department, and we've done quite a bit with engineering and public works. And Amanda has gotten right in and dug in with them, some of which have been things that they had kind of started or were in process, and they've handed off and said, please run with this. Or others where, based on going out and doing the research through signing up for these different web blasts and whatever, or she's getting push me emails based on what she's signed up for, where she's actually seen this may be an opportunity. Is this of interest for our fire department? Is this applicable? Because once again, she's not a fire person, but she's learning, and so she's working with, and Chief Contreras has been great with respect to, he's identified a couple key individuals that she's worked with so far. So right now, we're in Engineering Public Works, we've met with Engineering Public Works, and they've identified these are the 4 or 5 kinds of things to go after. We're not going to try to replace what happens in the Caltrans world with respect to roads. That's not our expertise. But there's other kinds of grants out there that are bells and whistles to go after. And those are the kinds of things that we're looking at. So based on John Corella's priorities, Amanda has that, and she knows that these are the kinds of things to be on the lookout based on what he's identified as his priorities. We are gaining a sense from the fire department, and we know that there are certain things, and we've identified opportunities that we've been sending off the police department. A few in development services, but that's probably, when you look at the overall 4 overarching departments that we service, that's the realm right now. But
It's a little bit of both.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, and we're looking to gain a priority list over this first year of identifying. We have to get our feet wet.
I understand. Thank you.
I'm going to add, really, the number one guide for what they do along with every department is it something that coordinates with our strategic plan? Because if it's something that's causing us to get into some area that hasn't even been identified, it's probably going to fall lower on the priority list than if it's going to further something that you all identified through the strategic planning effort.
I suspect that over time we will evolve. And right now, we're grabbing what's out there. It's kind of new to us. Oh, that might be something somebody wants, but we're just kind of grabbing. I think eventually we'll really have a grasp of what specifically. We might pick up some low-hanging fruit, but specifically we want these things.
And you'll see a little bit of that fruit that we've garnered. You'll also see that we're actually building call it a database, for lack of a better term, of what we've gone after and taken notes, and based on feedback that we're receiving from the departments, these are the kinds of things to go after. These are the kinds of things not to go after. Another element, the strategic plan is an excellent comment. Another element is sometimes, depending upon life in the universe, you just don't go after a grant for the sake of getting a grant, because you have to evaluate what are the match requirements, and guess what? When you build it, what is it going to take to maintain it? So we have to evaluate. Those are some of the criteria and some of the things that we have to analyze and work and coordinate with the department.
And I had a question about kind of a time management in terms of the grant writer, Amanda, who I met, and lovely. So is your time overseeing current grants? Is there any time for that, or
It's both.
It's both. Okay.
So what we've done
and
is
it-
anything that was ongoing at the beginning of the fiscal year, council member, that's passed. We're letting that finish. We're starting from ground zero. And so from this fiscal year forward, and you'll see it in later slides, there are some grants that, Amanda came to us in November. I mean, even though it was identified and part of just the priority schema and personnel and recruiting and everything with the advertisement, she was able to start the end of November. So we're at almost her, today's March 27th. It's her 4-month anniversary. She started on November 27th. And so she's been with us now 4 months. So in that vein, it's been a matter of anything from July 1st forward, Rick and Amanda have put it in the grant master, it's in the grant manager, we're working with it in the ERP, so some of these grants were already there.
Okay.
But what's history in prior years are history. We're not going to try to recreate the wheel for the past. But this will hopefully build an inventory, just like the other kinds of things we've been to you on, whether it be risk or whatever. We're starting from ground zero, and we're trying to build and go forward in each fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Kevin?
Yes, sir.
Yes, from what I hear is you are meeting, or the grant writers meeting with each department in determining what grants we have received and have applied for in the past and received, correct?
But also what makes sense for us to go for so far, and you'll see in some slides coming up, the grants that we've been already applied for under our clock.
Okay.
And so there are new grants.
And are we having a monthly, weekly meeting with these departments? Because we have departments that write their own grants. Now, are these departments going to continue doing such, or is the grant writer is going to take over writing those?
It won't be a complete takeover. For example, anything that's road-related, Caltrans-related, that's engineering, and they will continue to use their engineering expertise, whether it's in-house or through their outsourcing. So that will continue. But there are other kinds of engineering grants, Safe Streets or anything like that, that Amanda has come across, and she's coordinated with John Corella, and we're pursuing those opportunities that are like icing on the cake. So we are planning on doing that kind of thing. Taking over completely, no, but it is evident that Amanda is becoming an integral part with respect to creating the infrastructure of a grant application, and then using the resources available through historical documents or whatever to go and not just fill in the blanks, but capture data, and then for the relevant functional domain expertise, then she will coordinate with a captain or in the fire department or a chief in the fire department or with Deanna in public works or with engineering an engineer to identify, give me the functional words that go in this section. So everyone's working from the same template. She's in control of that because we want to make sure we maintain effective version control and we don't have different versions out there that people are working from. So she's kind of like the gatherer.
Okay. Now, when it comes to engineering, right now we're in the process of analyzing and trying to start an assessment district in a certain area here in Cathedral City. Now, in other cities, the water departments have gotten involved and worked with cities to actually apply for certain grants, to actually bring all the resources and develop that area. How are we going to do that? Is Amanda going to be working with our engineering department? Or our engineering department is going to take over and possibly work with the water district to get such?
She would functionally support. She would be a support person in that vein. So right now we're in phase 2A with respect to that. That was the one that was funded for the $56,000 or $57,000 to continue on. And so in that vein, when we get to either 2B or Phase 3, she would be a support. But you're right, in an assessment district, it is a collaboration between not only the city, but a water district. And for example, in different assessment districts, we were more successful in securing grants. Like for example, the Cove Assessment District, we had 3 different grants back in the 04-05 timeframe. Whereas, like for example, in the 35th Avenue District, we did not have any grants. But she would be a support role, and then based on that being on the radar, she would be going out and looking for keyword searches for different types of grant funding opportunities if it fit the bill to support that initiative. Okay. But she would not be the lead. They would, between ourselves and the Water District, they would be the leads.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anything else? So with respect to identifying the funding opportunities, we've kind of talked about some of this from a standpoint of, you know, in working with the department head, determining is this something feasible, not, you know, in sending out, we receive feedback, yes, this is something we want to pursue, let's go for it, no, this is not something on our radar. She would assemble the parties, identify the grant team members at the bottom of this slide. Then as the team is brought together, doing a detailed review of the requirements, that where roles would be assigned and identify, tied to those roles and what we would pull from, do we have any existing projects that are either current or pending that could be relevant, that could be drawn on? We could determine what the grant project would be, and then the match. That match is very important because sometimes we forget about the match. And I've already touched upon that, whether, you know, 100% are great, 90-10s are okay, 80-20s are okay, but when we get into the 50-50s, we've got to make sure not only do we have the money for our match, our share, but are we going to be able to maintain whatever it is we're going to either procure or build.
Excuse me, Kevin.
Yes, sir.
Tracy, we lost the chart on our computers here, for those that like it here. It's not on our screen. There we go. It's back. Thank you. Sorry, Kevin. Please continue.
So we talk, to continue on with the match concept, sometimes, and there are opportunities that we actually have to build into the schedule. Sometimes, not most of the time, but sometimes there are opportunities that we have to come to you and get council approval first. We already have it in there, we have to get council approval to accept the grant. But there are times where they actually, there's a box to check. In that, you know, we have received council approval and then we have to show it. So that's something that has been added to our checklist when that kind of thing happens. So if we make it through all that and everyone's happy and we have a team, then we start, we begin. So tied to the application, when we begin, we start tracking it in the ERP. We identify it in Tyler Munis. Once again, we have the grant team, and we identify who's going to be writing the grant narratives, who's going to be preparing the grant budget and the timeline. And usually that budget and timeline is a collaboration between the organization we service and finance. From a budget standpoint, obviously them to work out the numbers, especially if people are involved, and how we would apply those labor charges if need be. Determining what the required resources are, whether they're people resources, or are we going to go out and are we going to procure resources? Are we going to use third-party resources? Are we just going to be buying things? Doing a final review to include the department head to ensure that before we actually look at submitting a grant, that all parties are reviewed from a financial standpoint, financial services, from the functional department standpoint, the managers and or the department head in the servicing organization.
I have a whimsical question.
Yes, ma'am.
What's the shortest time you've ever seen a grant be approved? What's the longest time, or until you said never mind?
It's wide open. Shortest, I affectionately call it a population grant. If it's something that is yours for the having based on here in the state of California, there are those kind of grants where based on our population, our 55,000 plus, and how we fit in, it's ours for the asking. And as long as you apply, you get it. And as long as you apply it, and usually you receive notification within that month that you're going to get it, but you may not have the final authorization based on their hierarchy. And we actually had that as an example within the last year. We received notification on the EECBG that we were getting that funding, but we had to pull back and hold back because we didn't get the official document for 2.5 months after we received that initial notification. Longest, that's, I don't even know. Yes, yes, you probably would. The biggest thing for us from a longest standpoint is when do we get the grant reimbursement funding? You know, how long are we out on the hook for having funded this? And that could be 2 and 3 years sometimes, unfortunately. So then once it's awarded, we do come back based on that award, and you've seen that a couple times already this year prior to Amanda starting, but we had like a Firehouse Subs grant from the fire department. We had an FM3 Global grant. We brought that forth to you all for you to approve, because once you approved, the next day we issued purchase orders to be able to procure, because everything was ready, willing, and waiting. We just needed your approval.
And on a side note, we were at Firehouse Subs about a month ago. The district manager was there, and he said, "Oh, I know Cathedral City has their something in the hat. They've thrown their name in the hat for some funding." So
and you know, Firehouse Subs, just in the last 10 years, we've been awarded we've had 2 grants, and
we have a big one up for $17,000.
And they've been a great collaborator. So once we have the approval, we begin the project. When we have the notice to proceed, once again, we have the different types of roles and responsibilities, whether they're financial tasks, whether they're administrative tasks, or they're technical tasks. We've identified these tasks for the grants analyst, the project administrator, and the department members. We meet as needed based on the complexity, and in today's world, sometimes those meetings, it's great because they can be Teams or Zoom. They don't have to be in person, and it's more efficient. As the project nears completion and we're going through, we're making sure that the grants analyst makes sure that quarterly reports, if quarterly reports are required, that the department is doing those, because we don't want to spend money, then lose something on a technicality. We want to make sure that we're dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And then as we get into closure, the different kinds of tasks to get to that once we know that we're done. The financial tasks we've identified, the administrative tasks, and the technical tasks. And this is where it's very important. We're making sure that that we're going to be capturing or have captured the information in the ERP, because we want this data to be historical data on a go-forward basis, so that we have a resource, so that if we're going after something like this in the future, we're not scrambling. We can go straight to it. And I'll give you an analogy. Sometimes, let's look at the demand register. Sometimes there's questions from any of the 5 of you on what is this expenditure, what is that expenditure? Before we had this ERP, we had to go find those remittance advices, those non-negotiable checks, and those invoices in folders in our offices. Today, if the city manager or the assistant city manager sends us a request, we just pull up the ERP and we pull in the remittance advice, or we pull in the invoice and we send it and say, this is what it's all about. What a great time saver. So we use that analogy because this is the kind of time saver we want to export in all the functions that we have in financial services. So we meet to confirm the requirements were met. We ensure that the funds are received. This goes back to that point I made earlier. Sometimes it takes a little while to get those funds in, and then we finalize. So let's talk about applications that have been completed in this short time. For example, the first one had started, the EECBG. Amanda I was able to hand it off to her and say, please coordinate with Engineering and Public Works and just finish this puppy up. And we're now actually procuring. We actually we approved a check request today, an invoice for a $97,000 payment that's going to be made tomorrow on this $112,000 grant. The California Cal OES, the CERT grant, that was recently submitted within the last month for $25,000. And Amanda did that from cradle to grave and working with the fire department, and it was truly a collaboration. She learned from them and they learned from her, and it was good all around. A FEMA assistance to the firefighters grant, that was already in process, but she was able to continue on with that and work with that with the fire department to complete. In progress, the California Fire Foundation, we have a $15,000 grant that we're finishing up on that. Oh, I went too fast. Ongoing grants with assistance now being provided, that DOE CBG that we talked about at first, the Child Passenger Safety Grant through the Office of Traffic Safety, we're working that. And then the LEAP grant. The LEAP grant's an old population grant that was money that we were able to get. And we were able to do that with respect to work that was done through Terra Nova on the housing element of the general plan. But we didn't use all the money. And we went back to the grant administrator and said, we didn't use all the money. They gave us a one-year extension. So Amanda's running with that one-year extension. She's working with Andy Firestein in development services, and we've identified we have about $63,000 remaining, and we're actually going to, on ADUs, Andy's doing an effort that will be completed by the end of June for $75,000. So the good news is the housing fund is only going to cost $12,000 net, because we're going to be able to use that $63,000 extra that was left on the table. And so Amanda has worked with the state on securing that, completed the paperwork.
Kevin?
Yes, sir.
I have a question. Now, are we keeping track of grants that we have received and grants that we have not, or received or were denied?
We are.
And that we know if those grants, first of all, what to do if we didn't get it, to get them in the future, but also, are these grants available on an annual basis as well?
And that's true, because some of them they're things that come up every year, and some of these things we may not have known about, but now we're out there and we're learning. So, and they may be ours for the asking, and it's just applying for them on an annual basis. But you hit on a key point, sir, that we haven't gotten to yet, because we're so young at this. We haven't had enough history yet. But we will lose some. And when we lose some, it's developing the inventory of why did we lose, and being able to have that group grow afterwards to find out the lessons learned. Also, to be able, because granting agencies, when you don't win and you have deficiencies, some of them are more forthcoming about telling you where you screwed up. And so we're going to do that. We're just not going to sit on the sideline. So in time, we will develop that piece of it, because we don't have that yet. But we are developing that database of what we've gone after, and Amanda keeps that up to date with respect to what we've identified, what we, in working with the departments, what they said yay on, what they've said nay on, and then what we pursue and form a team. So in a year, the goal is we should have a pretty substantial database by function to know our successes and to also know our failures and what we need to do better.
So do annual grants look down on your, how they rate you if you failed last year and you apply again? Or is it just a fresh sheet every year?
Usually the latter. And here's a good example. Dream Homes Park. Dream Homes Park was round 4. We went back to the well. Yay for us for having the gumption to go back to the well and not giving up, because it could have been easy to give up. I mean, we were fat, dumb, and happy because we won in round 1. And in round 1, both the city of Coachella and the city of Cathedral City were the only 2 parks that were granted in round 1 in the valley. And then when we went and were not successful, we learned from that. And that was a perfect example of outsourcing with a noted grant writer that we love. And went back to the well and learned from that, and here we are with round 4, and we won. It's going to be a gold-plated park. It's going to be a beautiful park.
I don't think we won that much.
So this goes back to Councilmember Lamb. These are the types of things that date back to July 1st that we are now tracking in the Tyler Muniz Grants Manager and the Grants Master. We want to build that history. So some of these names you did not see previously because they are not grants that we've gone after. Ooh, I did it again. And that was the second page of the same thing. There were 2 pages of the grants that we've already loaded into our ERP. And that is now the end. Any questions?
I don't see any questions on, or comments by council on the queue, no? Thank you, Kevin, very much. Do we have any public comments on this, City Clerk?
I don't have any request to speak forms, but if you're a member of the public and you wish to provide public comment on this item, please raise your hand.
Great.
And I'm sorry, you introduced the gentleman who's working with Amanda, but I have forgotten his name.
Amanda and Rick,
Rick.
yes.
Well,
And
it's such a complicated name, I could see where I could miss that one, Rick.
Richard, he'll go by Richard.
Okay.
And so, and Rick has been very effective at training, and he loves to train people. And so HR has a buddy system kind of thing now. And so when Amanda was hired, HR asked, who will be Rick's buddy? They have another term, but that's my term. And so I went to Rick and said, you're good at this. Would you do this? Because Amanda is new to government. She has done grants, and this would be effective. You know Tyler, you know Munis, and this would be a great Mutt and Jeff opportunity for the 2 of you to take this out for a spin and to work with the grants manager and the grants master, and they've done a great job.
And you guys aren't old enough to know Mutt and Jeff is not a derogatory term. It was actually kind, but it sounds
It
terrible.
is
not
kind.
Mutt
Oh,
and
it,
Jeff.
oh, I don't intend it to be not kind. But no, they're doing great.
Great, thank you.
We do have one more question from Councilman Gutierrez, please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yes, Kevin, do we have any conventions or educational training for Amanda and Rick that they can attend in which they can be provided with federal, state, and local and private grants?
We've done some of the latter. We haven't done any conventions, sir. We haven't found any of that, but we are getting notifies now. And we've done 3 or 4 different types of webinars and that type of thing, but we're on the lookout. And we actually have identified and earmarked some of our training budget for that type of thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin, as usual, thank you. It's complete, and you do a great job.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you. We're
I have a
excited
black
about it.
screen and I don't know what to do, so I'll have to ask
Okay.
Tracy to help.
All right. Thank you. This is presentation is for discussion only and direction. There is no formal action required. Item D, refunding tax allocation bonds.
This is going to be Kevin as well. And when he first mentioned the possibility of this to me, it seemed counterintuitive because everything you hear is about higher interest rates and things like that. So I'm thinking, how can we get savings by doing a refinance now when the interest rate are high? Well, I learned through that commercial interest rates, which is what you hear about, and tax-exempt municipal bond rates don't necessarily move together. And so we do have the opportunity to accrue some savings by this, which Kevin is going to explain to you all.
Okay. We need the presentation on our computers. They're not on.
The staff reports. Some of us still have grants management. He had it, no.
There it goes. We got
There
it.
it goes, okay.
Thank you. Ready to go.
We have an IT master plan coming to you soon. Maybe we need some help. It was just a plug for you. Good afternoon once again, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members, city staff, interested guests, either here or out there in the internet land. We are here this afternoon to talk about tax allocation bonds and a potential opportunity to refund a couple of our bonds. And as Charlie said, it makes sense, but there is some counterintuitive, so let's talk a little bit about that and what this means. So when you think about the former redevelopment agency, you've seen this map before. Other than what's up north that was annexed in over to the west to Palm Drive and what was annexed in over to the east over to Bob Hope Land, basically our entire city is a part of the redevelopment agency. There was a project area 1, then there was a project area 2, and then everything was merged when 3 came along and we became one big happy family. So what's still out there from a tax allocation bond standpoint? Because we've refunded over the years and refunded over the years after the successor, after the RDA went away, both the 80% and the 20%. 80% being the former redevelopment agency for things like our library, for things like the infusion to the Auto Center, the kinds of things that you do with redevelopment dollars. And then the 20% housing that, under the old RDA, for what was our housing agency at the time, that went away when the dissolution happened. So these are the outstanding tax allocation bonds. The two highlighted in yellow are the two that we're talking about this afternoon, the 2014A and the 2014B. And those mature in the mid-2030s. So when you look at those, they're currently callable and they have about 10 years left. So this is really the last opportunity to see any real savings by doing it now. And Raymond James came back to us to say, okay, these are on the docket. Is this something to pursue? And they presented, and it was like, not only yes, but yes. And so the opportunity was, let's bring this to council. Talking to Charlie, talking to Ann, do you think that this is a win? They said yes. So that's why we're here. So when you look at the 2014A and the 2014B, which were refunds from the 2007s, the original issue amounts, and you see the outstanding amounts, keep in mind they are tax exempt. The current rate for these bonds is 5%. Ooh, I've just got this thing that I am doing a double click and I don't even know I'm doing a double click. So when you look at the 30-year history, the current rate, back on the 4th of March, when this had to be prepared to be able to run forward with it, it was 3.82. Yesterday it was 3.83. So in 22 days, we're pretty stable. So we did check in with the bond folks and we're at 3.83. So when you look at a chart like this, you can read in the box up above there that 86% of the time, the rates have been higher. 13% of the time plus, the rates have been lower than that average. And we're just spot on right now. If we do a refunding, here's the good news. Look at the second line, the all-in cost, which includes the cost to actually do this effort, between the two will equal 3.45%. So 3.45% versus the 5%.
Because you said that the current rate is 3.82%, although the chart says 3.11%.
That's on these two bonds. That's the average current rate period. That's not on our universe of bonds, sir. On the previous slide? That's just average. That's the world. That's out there.
So that's out there in the world, but somehow we have a different rate here.
Because
Explain, please.
We have housing bonds. And guess what? In the municipal bond market, housing bonds rate better than RDA bonds.
See, these are, this is an interesting staff report because you're talking about now we're only looking at 2014 A and B series, but I don't see that anywhere in the staff report. You listed all of them. And so, yeah, this is going to be an interesting presentation. So please explain when the numbers that are on the slides don't match what you were given in the staff report. So, like the previous slide.
Okay, I'm sorry. That was just for your information.
Okay, so you're talking, so when you're saying the world out there, you're saying the general market for
the last 30
tax-exempt
years.
bonds.
This is for the last 30 years. This is 94
well,
through 24.
I got you, but I'm not looking at the whole chart. I'm looking where it says current rate 3.82 as of 3/4/2024, and then I'm looking in what was in the staff report. It says current rate as of 3/4/2024, 3.11, and then you go to the next slide and it's 3.11 again. So that's my question is, how are we leaping from 3.82 to 3.11 for the same date?
I apologize for the 3.82. That's out there in the world.
All right, well,
for what we're looking at today, the all-in true cost, if we pursue a refunding today, on line 1, combined for the 2014A and 2014B, that would be refunded as a Series 2024A and a 2024B, be would be 3.11.
And where did that number come from?
The combination of the 3.19 and the 2.9 and the weighted average of the values of the outstanding
So
bonds
where
from
did the
before.
3.19 and the 2.9 come from? Not from there, because that's higher.
So based on the bond agents, the bond folks going forth and determining if we would refund this 25,000 and this this 25.3 million and the 9.8 million, and those ratios, those are the initial interest costs on the 4th of March that were the combined rate of the 3.11.
Okay.
Then when we add in the costs for doing the refunding, that brings it up to 3.45%.
All right, well, we'll touch on that, I think, later, or hopefully, what that cost is. But, all right, that's the part that's missing is just, there's a lot of numbers here, but it's not clear where they come from. And that chart was very confusing because it seemed to be offered as an explanation of the rates, where the rates came from, but then they don't match the rates that are on the chart.
So based on based on those rates that are there, back to this chart,
Okay.
the gross savings combined would be $2.8 million, almost $2.9 million between the two. The net present value over time, that would come down to the 2.4 million. The combined net present value, the combined percent savings would be almost 7%, 6.94%. Once again, invalidating it with the bond folks yesterday, that 6.94% is still on target. It's actually at 7%, 22 days later, just as a tidbit of information.
Higher savings is better, yes.
So when you look at what we talk about, and Danny mentioned this earlier this afternoon in the Finance Advisory Committee meeting with respect to the 16 cents on the dollar, if you look at when property tax comes to the city, if we get 16% of that, we would receive approximately, over that 10-year period, $460,000. The Department of Finance, the state would receive the remaining 84% that would go to all the applicable agencies that our property tax gets dispersed to. It's a win. It's a win for everyone to be able to pursue this opportunity.
And I was going to say, the total projected bond savings is a much better chart than we have in, because I didn't understand really. I tried to follow it. I was doing a little posting.
Okay.
I was trying to follow it, but this is helpful.
Does this help?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but at least I understand.
Well, there was a similar chart in here, but again, I think the part that was missing in the staff report, in my opinion, I know that we're not approving the staff report, was there was no talk about what the current interest rate was on the series, and it didn't even really identify which series you were talking about, except for in the paragraph at the beginning of the text.
And I'll own that, because I thought by doing the paragraph at the beginning that I touched upon it, but I'll go back and make that better when we come back to you, assuming you support this and we come back to you for the approval.
Because I think if it had said at the beginning of the current interest rate on these two that we're looking to refund is 5%, and the market rate now is,
Got it.
3.19, then before we got to this meeting, we could have been a little bit more prepared as to what's going on.
Good feedback.
But it didn't say that, so, and I know we
And
chatted.
and London
wasn't
is,
sure.
I'm sure, looking out of the back of my head, London's writing notes because she's our debt person. And so she's joined us for this meeting. So we'll make sure we get that addressed when we come back to you, if you approve us coming back to you.
Okay. Well, because it looks like you have other series that you may be looking to refund in future years.
We are not.
So you don't. None of the rest of them are refundable?
These are, that is correct. These are the two that are refundable.
Okay.
So when you look at this chart, year by year, you can tie back to the overall savings, and then over to the right in this chart, Once again, 16% of 297,000 in year one, and so on and so forth. When you apply the 16% versus the 84%, that's how you get that $460,000 on the previous slide. So call it $45,000 to $48,000 on average a given year would be additional property tax to the city for the next 10 years, if we do this. So the sensitivity analysis, because this would be like other kind of bond offerings or bond refundings that we've done in the past, we would want to monitor this. And that's why, in pointing out to you that we checked in yesterday with the bond folks to see where we were at 22 days later. The conventional wisdom, and Charlie touched upon this, the conventional wisdom is that, you know, when you're out there in the market and you hear, well, interest rates are 7%, 6.5%, you know, 6.6 or whatever. What's out there in the mortgage market versus what's out there in the taxable bond market, generally speaking, you're looking at about 60% lower is the kind of number, 60% plus, that you're going to find with the tax-free for municipal agencies. And that's what we're talking here. So that's why we can be looking at that all-in cost of that 3.45%, which would yield this savings of 6.94. We want to make sure that we would not do that. We would not pursue this opportunity if rates go up and this savings of the refunded bonds, the percentage would go down. Because if you notice out if it would increase by 40 basis points, that's about what our break-even point would be, because highlighted on the fifth line down, the 5.05% on the slide with respect to, if it would get that high, we would call it halt, or we would stop. Just the initial work that was done with respect to it, and yes, okay. but that's why you wouldn't necessarily stop, because if we've made it this far, and that would be part of what we would tie back. If it doesn't make sense for it to happen, it's just something that we would monitor. And in the subsequent slides, you'll see the key dates and the time frames for part of this monitoring.
Okay, thank you.
So you're saying if it did temporarily rise, not knowing how long, you wouldn't stop, but you might pause?
You could pause. For example, if it were up 50 basis points, we wouldn't want to do it, but we could pause.
And then see if it went back down in some reasonable amount of time.
Fingers crossed, it's not supposed to happen, but we know how these things happen. Right now in the current marketplace, part of trying to leverage this is doing this now, and you'll see in the timeline coming forth in the next 3 to 4 months is what we're looking at.
All right. Well, that's part of my question, because I thought you had mentioned at one point that the reason you even looked at doing this is that some type of time period happened where they could be refunded.
Okay, so every year we do an annual recognized obligation payment schedule with the county and the Department of Finance. And so, and this is part of the schedule, we need to get this on the docket to be able to do that so that we can make it happen for this year. Because in order for it to happen this year, we want to be able to leverage that 10-year period.
I think that's what you mentioned, the 10-year period, so.
Because that's about what's left.
I see, okay. So there would be, at some point in time, if you pause, there wouldn't be a 10-year period left.
Correct.
So you might lose the ability. And is that why this wasn't considered maybe a couple of years ago when it looks like the rates were even a little lower? Because you were waiting till we got to the 10-year period, or is
we were waiting to this period. It would have been nice to have done. Now, note, we did the 2021s, and we did the 2014s. It was all about timing, but yes, it was on these two. It was to get to these two, the final 10 years.
I see.
Here's the chart with the dates. The key date is coming back to you in 4 weeks, to be on the agenda in 4 weeks on April 24th, to have your approval to go forward, because London will have to have the packet into the county the next day on the 25th, knowing that we'll probably have signed resolutions a few days later, and we've already coordinated that with the county, and they're okay with that. Because their actual meeting is not until May 16th. When they approve it on May 16th, and once again, there's no reason for them not to approve it because they would see the savings as well, this will get shipped off the next day to the Department of Finance at the state. The Department of Finance has up to 65 days. That's the initial calendar when they were in this business, when they first got started with this. There isn't that much activity going on with redevelopment and what has phased out and the like, so there aren't that many opportunities for them for this kind of thing. So it's not like we're in the queue, like it used to be in the old days. So then here's the calendar with the final closing to be before the middle of July.
And if we get right there and then something has happened where we've gone above the basis points, we can stop.
Correct. And so what would be happening is, so on April 24th, so when we submit this agenda, we'll have new rates based on what it is, and then we'll do the same thing the day before. Okay, because the agenda is usually about 2 weeks prior to or thereabouts. Then we'll have in our hip pocket where things are at. Let's call it on April 22nd or April 23rd. We'll know what the percentages are to give you all the assurance.
An update.
Do we run with this? And then we won't just sit back and eating bonbons over that next 3 months. We'll be monitoring what and how it goes. Knock on laminate.
Now, Kevin,
If
can the
they won't
rates,
go this way, they'll be here or go down.
now, can the rate be locked in?
It cannot.
It cannot. Okay. Is there a fee that will make it available to be locked?
Pardon?
Is there a fee?
That we can't. It's just the market. It's the marketplace. It's not like, with a conventional mortgage, locking in, when you're going through the loan approval process, do you punt or do you lock in because of what's going on and get that rate? It's not that type of opportunity, sir.
Right. Well, that's why I think it's important. I mean, it'll be locked in when it closes. So if it goes by this chart, then it would close on or around July 11th. But if at that point it's risen, then we can say, stop, wait, and then restart it.
And it goes back to that chart with respect to the basis points. If it goes up 5 or 10 or something like that, but we still see good savings that everyone wins, yay.
All right. I'm a little sensitive to this because if you remember, we had a pension bond, and then we had a presentation on that. There were many issues with that, but one of them was that there was a rate, and then there was a similar chart to this that showed what the savings could potentially be if it went up. And then the next meeting, lo and behold, we got told, well, it already went up past the end of the chart. So
that team is very sensitized to that.
We need you to approve.
So we tried
ahead
to
of that,
make
which
sure.
the council then did. And then, at the end of the day, what that just meant is we didn't get as much savings, and then it made our the way I look at our risk return narrower. And then, of course, that has continued to go up and down. So that's another thing. But so that's when I look at this, I get a little bit like, well, all right, this sounds really good, but we're not going to get, this isn't one where we're going to say this looks good, but then another meeting go up and up and up.
And one of the differences that happened when that happened a few years ago is that we had, and I believe the city manager you did an analysis within the last year, Charlie, where you charted it out, where we didn't have a flat. With this one, we went with a flat. We didn't even look. We wanted to be able to see that we would be, call it safety cav. Wanted to make sure that we were going to have, if that number is in that 45 to 48 range, we're going to know that we're going to have that kind of property tax impact consistently year after year after year. We don't need to bet on any come or whatever and tie back to any roller coaster. There was an alternative, and I didn't even present that alternative because it doesn't make sense. This is the safe route to go.
And I think, Councilmember, to address your concerns, that when this item is brought back, that the authorization is very clear of what authorization Kevin is asking for the council, so that that if it does cross a certain line and, a certain percentage, that it's not going to go forward. So I think that's what was attempted in the staff report, and if this is something the council wishes to be brought back, that it'll be really clear what that authorization is that you're giving Kevin to move this forward.
And when you go back to that slide, at that point in time, when we come back on the 24th, where there were the basis points options, we'll have one of those highlighted, say, and it probably won't be the end one to get to the 505. It will probably be the one before to say, if we get to here, it keeps getting in the way. Let's pause.
Okay. All right.
So we'll make that recommendation.
And it was
on the
already kind of
24th.
covered. I mean, there are some professionals that you will be working with, your bond agents and others that we'll be working with, and they're going to be compensated for their work if this goes through and actually gets funded then.
That's what gets us from the 3.11 to the 3.545.
And I think most people are familiar with that because if you refinance a mortgage, if your mortgage was $200,000 and you refinance it, maybe $210,000, and but it's at a lower rate, but you've made up the savings in there. I mean, the professionals don't work for free, but they roll it into until you make some payments temporarily, your actual loan amount, or in this case it would be a bond amount, would be higher than what it initially was to pay for
And
that.
a minor point to make as part of getting to that all true in cost, when those professionals are compensated, we the city are compensated for our time too. So we receive a check and have in the past whenever one of these refundings has happened. And I don't know how much aware you all have been of that, but we actually are compensated for our time.
Well, that's good.
And we do a pro rata amount for the various people that are involved, to include the people sitting around this
But
time.
none of that happens until the actual refunding is final,
Correct.
So if it should pause and then never go forward, all of those are kind of working on a contingency that they may never get, but they would.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yes. Anything else? I think my next slide was at the end. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Any
Thank
more
you, sir.
questions from council or comments? No? What's that? Go save us money, all right.
We're going to try.
City Clerk, do we have any public comment?
I don't have any request to speak forms for this item, but if you're a member of the public and you wish to provide public comment, please raise your hand.
Terrific.
I see none.
Thank you. Thanks again, Kevin. Much
Thank you.
appreciated. Okay, we're going to adjourn. The city attorney, would you please read the closed session item?
Mayor, I'd be happy to do that. We have one item on closed session. It is an item of anticipated litigation. Only one item.
All right, thank you. This time, we'll adjourn and go to closed session.